Hello, my name is Joshua Spears. I'm really thrilled to spend some time with you all today as you all get their due recognition for Nurse Appreciation Week. It's just really a privilege to spend some time with you all today. As a speaker, as an author, consultant, I spend a lot of my time with nurses, educators, and those folks who spend a lot of their time serving others. And I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you all. It's going to have a little bit of motivational speech and a little bit of professional development, hopefully all blended into one. It's something that you all can take away from and really enjoy. And as we go through our time here together today, it's important for us to maybe pause every once in a while and think about some of the questions I'm going to ask as if we were together live in person. As with anything, the more we apply it to our lives, the more helpful it becomes to us. And I always like to think in metaphor. You're going to hear that quite a bit from me. And have you ever noticed with your life, a lot of times it can kind of unfold like scenes from a movie? Have you ever noticed that? Like, think about your life and think about when you got your first job, or when you graduated from high school or college, or your first kiss, or the first date with your significant other, and think of how it unfolds in those times. I remember a lot of scenes from the movie of my life. For example, I remember growing up in an abusive home. I remember what that was like in that scene, and when my mom told me that she was going to leave my dad and we were going to divorce. And I'm sure many of us many different ways have had that scene, with some difficult scenes. And then I have other scenes. Look at this beautiful grade point average. You wouldn't have the job you do with a grade point average like this. It was a very difficult time, right? Very tough scene, struggling with depression and anxiety and all of these different things. And we remember our lives in these sets of scenes. And then I remember the first day I met Professor Anton, the first time I went to class, right? Maybe you have somebody in your life that you met them and they impacted you in such a way that you remember the first time you met them, and it's a scene. I remember he was trying to scare us all away, and it was something that really stuck with me, right? And then one of my favorite scenes, one of the most beautiful scenes in my life, is standing at the front of the church, and this big, huge aisles of this church, big enough that you could drive a car down it. And then at the other end was my wife, and this beautiful moment that we had together, right? And then, of course, the moment as each one of my boys were born. And as I look at my scenes, and you take a minute and look at the scenes of your life, it's easy to see how we can see our life kind of like a movie, right? And what I've noticed with me, and you may be a little different, is a lot of times it feels like the scenes don't match. For example, the challenges I had as a youth, you wouldn't know the life I have today. Sometimes they don't match. And a lot of times it's ideas that I've heard 100 times, right, that I hear again, right, and they click. And those are those revolutionary moments where we can really, have a moment. And hopefully we'll have a few of those today as we go through our time here together. I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you. And as we think about, as each of us think about all the different things we have going on, right, in all the challenges that you're up against in your profession, personally, professionally, in all these different areas. Just stop for a moment and think about all of those stressors, all of that pressure that we all no doubt feel on some level. Think about it just for a moment. So how am I doing? Right? How am I doing? And from my conversations I had with your leadership team, as well as my circle, which is medical professionals, from my wife to different people, and of course the space that I'm in, often realizing that a lot of us are feeling tapped out, a lot of us are feeling gassed, right? And sometimes we have to remember that we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves, right, so that we're able to help others, right? How many of us feel like that is something that we can certainly relate to, that feeling of I have all of these people that I'm sewing into, right? But sometimes, I feel like I'm out of breath. And just a little bit on a funny note, I was doing a presentation out in Los Angeles. I live in the Detroit area, and I was flying. I don't know if you've ever had this happen in real life, but it was pretty amazing to have that experience. in real life. And it was I definitely remembered, that slide from the presentation. But hopefully we can take a moment here. And I know that you're all watching it in different places and spaces, on your own, maybe as a group. But again, let's just take a moment and breathe in some of that air, breathe in some of that oxygen, and try to, think about all of the different things that we're going through, and do some stuff for us, right? That's one of the things that we're going to talk about quite a bit, is how hard it is sometimes for us to do stuff for us. So what about me, right? What about us? That's jumping back to the movie example. Every good movie, right, has a few key things. Every good movie has a lead character, right? And have you ever noticed that when you're on your way to work, you go out to your car, you get in, you buckle your seatbelt, next thing you know, bam, you're there. It's like the ride just happens automatically. It's just like it magically happens. But what we don't realize, during that time, as we're taking that, just one second here, as we're taking that trip along that ride, what we don't realize is that we're talking to ourselves. We're having this conversation with ourselves. We're talking about, what's happening at work and those challenges, specific patients, and maybe a doctor that we're interacting with, or our boss, or our subordinates. Having these constant conversations, thinking about what we just left at home. Again, all like scenes from a movie. And what's really interesting, if we look at it that way, and it's pretty quick to connect those dots, is, one thing that's constant with those scenes is that we're in all of them, right? We're the main character in all of those scenes, and it's just a really interesting way to look at our lives. And as I think about different characters in our lives, and different people, we have a lot of different ways that we can look at ourselves as a character, right? When I think of characters, one of the all-time characters I love are Barney and Andy. I mean, how many of us like the Andy Griffith Show? I ain't gonna lie, I still watch that show occasionally with my boys and my mom. It reaches everywhere. But two different characters. I remember one episode where Barney was told that there was some farmers selling some fruit by the road, and they weren't supposed to. So he went out there and he was going to show them with, he was going to get them off the side of the road and run them off. Right? Well, he went out there and they scared him away, right? Because he was terrified. He went back and told Andy some big tall tale about these guys out by the road and how terrifying they were, right? Then Andy went out there a little bit later, to follow up, and he had this conversation with the guys, and then they automatically knew that they couldn't be there because, the way that Andy communicated with them, right? But they have the same badge, right? They have the same authority, right? But they get two different results. And how many of us, when we look at ourselves, when we're watching that movie in our minds, and we think of ourselves, do we think about ourselves as more of a Barney character or more of an Andy character? What are some of Barney's traits? Obviously, he's the butt of most of the jokes. He's a comedy character. He's shooting the gun when he's not supposed to. A lot of people making fun of him. People don't take him very seriously. Right? And then there's Andy. He's calm, cool, collected. Everybody comes to him for advice. His wisdom is something that's sought after. And when he says something, he means it, and other people know he means it. They have the same badge. Right? When you see yourself in the movie of your life, what kind of a character are you? Are you one of these days they're going to figure out that I'm not good enough to do this, or maybe I'm a little too heavy, maybe I'm a little too slow, maybe I'm struggling, maybe people I got too much rust on my car, all of these different things. Or are we, I am who I am, and I have things I'm good at, things I'm not good at, but this is what you get, world, and I'm capable, right? And the thing about it is we don't oftentimes think about, self-esteem in such basic terms, but realistically, it really kind of is. And as you go through different things, there's a couple of things we want to ask ourselves. We want to be honest first. We need to be honest with ourselves and say, how do I see myself? What kind of a character? But then also, what does that mean to the rest of my life? Well, so for example, if you're going through an organizational change, you're having a rough day, you have too many patients for a specific day, or maybe you have something going on with your family at home, right? Which character is going to help get you to the best place, right? Which one of those characters? And that's the thing, is we don't always realize it, but we get to decide, what kind of a character we see ourselves as, right? And then the next question, and this is one that's kind of tough, right? This is one that's kind of tough, but at least for me, in my experience, I think it's essential, is, sometimes I see myself as someone who just doesn't quite cut the mustard. Maybe I see myself even worse. Right? And how does that impact my job, right? That confidence. But how did it get that way? Now, each of us have our own journey, and I'm not going to sit and, I could tell you extensive stories about how my self-esteem was damaged by trauma as a youth and abuses that I went through and all of those different things. But the fact is, we all have circumstances. Maybe it was a boss that talked to us a certain way. I've had that happen before, where I felt really small, right? And like maybe, and again, maybe it was how I took it. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was a relationship, a relationship that didn't end how we hoped. We hoped that it ended with death do us part. Maybe it didn't, right? What shapes that character in the movie of our lives? And it's important for all of us to take a minute and kind of think about that for just a moment. What is shaping, how is that formed, right? How is that formed in the movie of our minds? What was your thing? All right. I'm going to ask you to, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time here because I know that we all have, we got a lot of ground to cover. And I want to be very respectful of your time, but I encourage you to take just a moment and write down what kind of a character you see yourself as in the movie of your mind. And then what influenced that? Right? And another thing I want to ask you to think about too, what we'll get to a little later, is how valid is that? So again, I've shared this analogy thousands of times all over with all kinds of different people. And it really, if we're honest with ourselves and give it a fair shake, it's the first step, right, to us enjoying, and I'm not here to say, oh, do this and this will happen or become a millionaire. That's not my show. That's not my thing. I'm trying to help people enjoy who they are, enjoy the world around them. So as you go through and you think of those different things and some ways to get oxygen, right? So I put together, I like to talk about some specific areas that we can focus on. So this is abstract. How do I see myself? How do I see, the character in the movie of my life? But then also when it comes down to the nuts and bolts of it, what can I do, right? We're all different. And see, I love a checklist. I'm a big fan of a checklist. I really feel like it's very helpful for me because I think in metaphor, I think abstract, but I also believe in routine. And I know many of you and the roles that you play, those routines are essential. Those routines are key. So let's take a look at some of these things that you could put together as a checklist to say, maybe I'm going to take a look at this from time to time and say, am I doing these things? Are these things that I could do to help myself, right? Thus helping all of those around me. So the first would be, our mental, some things that we can do to take care of ourselves from a mental perspective. Trying a new hobby, right? This is something that, a lot of us may want to try. Maybe it's knitting. I was doing a speech the other day and it was very difficult for me a little bit, to be honest with you, because one of the ladies was knitting the whole time. This is a professional business meeting and she was knitting the whole time. But that's just that's her hobby, right? It was amazing how much she was just listening like crazy, but again, that's how she processes information. So each of us can try a new hobby, read a book, right? Read some books, join a book club. again, these are some different things that we can strategically, what can we insert in our lives to really help give ourselves some of that oxygen to take care of ourselves? Listening to audiobooks or podcasts. How much time do we spend maybe walking as exercise? I know you walk miles and miles per day anyway, just with your job. But on our way to work, what can we listen to really help us grow and help us build all of those? Another way that we can really help ourselves mentally is to mentor someone else, mentor a new nurse. And this is one of those situations. I was just having a conversation after a presentation recently with one of it was the executive director of the organization that had me in, and he was talking about how refreshing it is for him as a leader when he's helping his staff grow, because it helps validate his position too, right? And it helps that person who's looking for more information. And then, of course, building your knowledge, just learning to understand yourself a little bit more, right? I know myself enough to know, for example, for me, I know myself enough to know that I tend to overthink. So if I have a relationship with someone, I'm talking to somebody, I know myself enough to know that I'm going to amplify that conversation as I go forward. So the more I know about myself, the more I can say, you know, Josh, that's just how you are. That doesn't mean that that's a situation that really does warrant your attention. Of course, then there's physical too, right? Each of us has different ways that we like to burn some stress and recalibrate. Find exercises you enjoy. I got to be honest. I recently, my wife finally got me to buy a Peloton, and I wish I would have done it sooner because I really enjoy it. But maybe it's a fitness class. Maybe we're going to take a nap, right? Again, these are things that as a nurse, you know a lot of this. Sometimes when we don't look at it, we look at it as an optional activity, right? 7 to 9 hours of sleep. This one's tough. As I showed you earlier with my wife and kids, it's the challenge. And so I'm there with you. It's very difficult. Another thing that's always important too is to challenge your routine, right? What is that? What does that routine look like? For example, if we shaved a little social media and we invested that in sleep or exercise, what would that do? Again, I use social media every day. I'm just saying it's something for each of us to possibly think about. And then from an emotional perspective, right? Praising our others and ourselves, right? Being strategic. I'm going to go out of my way to find something positive with this other person that I'm gonna praise. And it's going to be very difficult if you get used to looking for the positive in others, right? It's going to be very difficult to always look at the negative in yourself because you're going to be training yourself to look at that. Again, and then find new hobbies is on there again. Planning a lunch date with a loved one, building, writing, creating something. And sometimes it's just as simple as watching a funny movie, right? Last night I watched a movie with my kids and they were gut laughing, and I was laughing not at the movie, but at them. And I was resetting myself, having that fun. And then from a spiritual perspective, we all have our own journey. We all have our own set of beliefs, but really some that are universal is keeping a gratitude journal. Again, these are just some ideas of things that we can do strategically, really to help ourselves. Set aside some time for reflection. Make it a point to, I'm going to go take some time for myself. Maybe that's your lunchtime or after work or right before work. For me, a lot of times it's in the car. Respect others and beliefs, right? This is one that we can always, and try to understand their beliefs, and volunteer for something that you're passionate about. Again, this is another area where, you spend your life serving others. And it's a different muscle though when it's volunteering, right? When it's maybe at your kid's school or grandkid's school or at a local organization. And then socially, eat lunch with somebody, have some fun. What can we do to go out there and say, I'm going to go out of my way to be social, right? I sometimes struggle with that, friends. I really do. Sometimes I want to be by myself, right? But I know that I need others, right? Ask coworkers about their days. And this is one that I want to encourage you. What if it's the maintenance guy? So we talk to the doctors, we talk to our colleagues, but what about that staff? Maybe we go out of our way to have these conversations, because a lot of those folks, maybe they're in that position because their dream one day is to have the same job as you, right? Because so think about asking them what that can do and how that's going to build you up. Going out with a friend, maybe planning a date night, take a few minutes, call a loved one, all right? From a personal level, right? Finding adventure, right? Interesting hikes, making a to-do list. Right? I'm kind of rolling through these here just so you can take a minute and think what is going to work for you. Every one of you is going to have a different takeaway from this. I've done this live, I've done this virtual, I've done it via recording, and there's always interesting things that come out of it. And then from a professional perspective, declutter, create solid goals, find ways to connect with coworkers, and try to be off the clock when you're not on the clock. And I'm right there with you, friends. That's tough. I have a hard time shutting it off, but the more I learn, which I have a long way to go too. We're in this together, right? I'm certainly not being on a soapbox. I'm just sharing some ideas and some thoughts that we can use together, right? And then from a medical perspective, physical activity, routine self-care, healthy food, all of those different things. So as we go into this, so again, that was some ideas. I'll ask you to think just for a minute of any of them that really stuck out to you. Which of these areas do you feel like you may benefit from focusing on? And then what steps could you take to possibly do that? Right. So we looked at some strategies. Moment here. We looked at some good strategies on how we can take care of ourselves and how we see us, that character, right, in the movie of our lives. And I'm sure many of us have seen different movie characters. But if I were doing an internal poll, and I were to ask everybody on here, everybody watching, which kind of a character do you see yourself more as, Barney or Andy? If you were honest, give me a fair shake. At least according to research and data, about 85% of you would say low self-esteem, Barney, right? Why is that? Why is it so easy for us sometimes to see the good in other people, but not in us? Right? We'll see the good in our coworker. We'll see the good in our kids, but when it comes to us, right? How does that happen? Right? Again, a lot of those strategies are helpful, but just another quick anecdote here. Reminds me of this story. There's this story about this couple, and they're a real big fan of the circus. They love going to the circus. Every time the circus comes to town, they just cannot wait to go. They go to every time it comes, they go. They get a soda, they get some popcorn, an elephant ears, some corn dogs, and they just enjoy the show. One time they're sitting there watching the show, and they just become absolutely mesmerized by the elephant. Here you have this animal that's big enough to crush a house, but yet it's so calm and serene. And they're just like, it doesn't make any sense. So they, you know what? Let's go down and take a look. So after the show, they go down and they go backstage, and they're walking along looking at all the animals, and then they come across this elephant. And it's this big giant beast, right? And the wife says, "Look at that!" And the husband's like, "Oh my goodness!" And what they were looking at was what was holding the elephant. See, the elephant had a small rope tied to a stake. And the wife's like, that doesn't make sense. That elephant, there's no way that rope is strong enough to hold the elephant. So the husband says, let's go. We got to get to the bottom of this. So they go and they find a trainer. They go to the trainer and they say, sir, couldn't this elephant rip this entire tent down anytime it wanted? The trainer said, absolutely it could, but it won't. And the wife says, how can that be? And so the trainer told him, see, when a baby elephant, at least this is how it used to be, when a baby elephant was born into captivity, they would take the baby elephant, they would take it out, they wouldn't give it any food, any nourishment, and they would tie it to a tree. And it would tug, and it would pull, and it would wail, and it would scream, it would do everything it could to break free from that tree, but it was too weak and too young to do it. And finally, after a short period of time, it would just stop, and it would give up. And as soon as it does, they go back to the baby elephant. They take it back to to its mother. They give it food. They give it nourishment, all the while leaving that rope wrapped around its leg. See, that full-size elephant is being held captive by the memory of its past. It's being held in bondage by the thought of its past failure. Its mind is just flooded with thoughts of, it's no use. I give up. See, friends, we're a lot like that grown elephant. Whether it's something that happened to us last week, or whether it's something that happened to us when we were 5, each of us has our own version of that rope. And what we don't realize a lot of times is we allow ourselves to be chained because of that pain, right? That pain. And I just want to take you to take for a minute and say, what is holding me back from seeing myself as the best version of myself, right? And realize that you may have been hurt. You may have been through a lot. Right, but we have grown through those things. Sometimes we're growing through those things. So it's something for each of us to think about as we examine, the character and the movie of our lives. Right? So hopefully, as we continue on, you can think about that for just a moment. Another thing that every good movie is going to have, right? Every good movie, and as a nurse, how you see yourself, how you carry yourself, all of those things are linked. And so as we see ourselves, right, that character, every other good movie is also going to have additional cast, a cast of characters. How do we see those people around us? How do we get here? What does that look like, right, for us to find our supporting cast? Just one moment here, please. As we find our supporting cast, we think about different seasons of our lives and how all of these different seasons really can, produce different things. As we look at our life, we talked earlier about my GPA, right? I shared this earlier. I'm going somewhere when it comes to cast. And again, I'm not making this all about me, but a lot of times we have people in our lives, just like any good movie. And I showed you Professor Anton earlier, right? I'm still in contact with him. When I went into that class, he was a villain. But let me show you a little more of what my life looked like during that same time. This was the same time that grade point average. Look how healthy I looked. Very, very healthy. And then you'll see my brother there, right? You can see the cast. And he was at that time, he was my little brother. And then as we grew a little bit older together, this was at my wedding, 2007. You can see we have our unique relationship with a lot of fun. Right? Who's been that person for you as you have gone through your life in your cast of characters? Who's really kind of walked through this with your life? And then this was actually just recently. This was at Dodger Stadium just a couple of days ago. Right? In the first case, he was definitely my little brother. And then it became more and more of us like peers. There's certain things where I mentor him. There's certain things where he mentors me. But who do you have in your life, right, that's helping shape those different things, right? And how we see those cast members. Sometimes we want to challenge the lens. We want to see different. We want to think about, how do we see ourselves, and how does that relate to how we see other people? As an example, have you ever been in a situation where you walked into a room and you just immediately, for whatever reason, felt really small? You just felt just tiny, like a bug. I'll give you an example. I do a bunch of stuff for my kids' school, and I was volunteering. I was doing this event, and these dads all were there from the school, all these different dads. And I'm just being honest. Hopefully you're being honest with yourself as we go through this, but I'm just being straight with you. I walked in there, I'm a bigger guy. You can see from the pictures. And there was some guys in there. I thought, man, he's in a lot better shape than me. And his clothes look really nice. Started feeling kind of small. Another guy I know his job title, right? He's the president and CEO of his company. Man, all of a sudden I started feeling really small. Another guy that dropped my kids off at his house. Has that ever happened to you, where you just feel really small? If we're honest, I think we can probably admit that to ourselves, that it has. What was interesting about that time is how I went in there and I recognized that this is garbage. And how was me seeing myself in that moment like Barney influencing that scenario, right? That situation, because I'm going to act like Barney, not Andy, right? Because I see myself, that's how I act, right? And this was interesting because as the evening went on, I started having different conversations. One of the dads came up to me and was talking to me about how things were going, and the next thing you know, he's telling me that him and his wife are going through a divorce that I had no idea about. And for some reason, he was telling me all about it. Another person that was there was some of the school leadership. They came up to me and they were asking me to do another layer of volunteering, leadership role within the parent leadership team. And then the next day, I actually ran into a mom whose husband was at the event, and she came up to me and was telling me how much fun her husband had the night before. Right. See, how they saw me was completely different from how I saw myself. Right? And how I saw myself influenced how I acted towards them. Now, I don't always do this, but in this case, I was able to course correct and identify the fact that I was seeing myself that way. But what kind of situations have you seen yourself in where how we see us influences how we see the cast in our lives? Because a lot of times what we find is that they don't always match. They don't always equal the same. So sometimes we want to challenge that lens a little bit. And as we think about challenging that lens, I'm going to ask each of you just to take a minute. You can pause. I won't pause because I want to make sure I get through everything. But pause the video and set a timer for 15 seconds. And take a minute and pause the video and count. Look around and count every blue thing that you can see. Whether you're watching at your desk, whether you're watching in your car on your lunch, whether you're watching at home. Look around the room that you're in and count all of the blue things. Take about 10 seconds to do it. All right. Give you just a minute to do that. Now, the next phase is what we want to do is I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Right? Right. And now I want you to count all of the brown things that you saw. I'm going to give you pause it, give yourself a little bit of time. Now, if we were live, what we would find is that we didn't find near as many brown things because the fact is we were looking for the other color. Right? We were looking for the other color, right? So how many times in our lives does that happen, right? And it reminds me of this old story about this old timer. That's what he sits out by the side of the road, and at all these people come through on these covered wagons, and they're coming through, and he'll wave to them, and everybody in town knows him. But this family he doesn't recognize pulls up, covered wagon, the man jumps off, runs up to him and says, "Sir, what kind of people live in these parts?" The old timer says, "Well, what kind of people live in the parts you came from?" The guy says, "Lying, thieving people. I can't wait to be rid of them." The old timer says, "I really hate to tell you this, but that's exactly the kind of people we have in these parts as well." Then just as that wagon was heading off into the sunset, another wagon pulls up, and the man jumps off, runs up to him and says, "Sir, what kind of people live in these parts?" The man says to him, "Well, what kind of people live in the parts you came from?" And he says, "Well, mostly good, honest, hardworking people." The old man says, "Well, that's pretty much what you're going to find around here." The idea is that those two exercises are driving, and I do two exercises on purpose because each of us look at things differently, right? But the fact is, from a scientific perspective, from a mental perspective, we find what we're looking for, right? We find what we're looking for in other people, right? We find those colleagues who maybe aren't cutting the mustard. We're looking for that. We're going to find it. We find people who are improving, getting better at their jobs. We're going to find it. We find, and so if we're looking for ways to encourage ourselves, we get creative on learning how to encourage ourselves as we encourage others, right? And how do I see me, that character, and the character of the movies of our lives? And the thing is just as we transition here into a little bit more conversation from a professional perspective, we talked about how we see us and that character, but a lot of times how we see other people, right, not only impacts our happiness, our joy, our relationships, but also our career. Also, our career. I remember one time many years ago, before I went into speaking full time, and I was working, I ran a facility, and I was asked to go help a colleague who ran a similar facility. Right? We shared a boss. We both had the same boss. She ran a facility. I ran a facility, and these are very complex facilities. And she was really having a tough time. Her name was Monique, and Monique was working hard. But they wanted me to go over there and spend some time with Monique and have a conversation with her and mentor her and shadow her to try to help her, because what she didn't know is they were actually considering replacing Monique because of that. I'm sure each of us have seen people or been in these types of situations. So as I was working with Monique, one of the first things, I'm sure with you, obviously, there's processes. So I was talking to her about, and she was struggling in almost every way. So I'm like, we're talking about processes. And so I asked her about processes, and I started listening to her, and she was outlining for me exactly what the processes should be, exactly what the processes are. And I was like, okay, so she knows the processes. So that's not the problem. And I said, well, just like with you, any good organization, there's going to be processes, and then there's going to be people. HR, human resources, our people. So I started asking her about her people. And I said, you're going to need this type of leader to do this, and this type of leader to do that, and this type of person to do this, as every organization has. And she went off to me telling me about how this person does this person can do that, this person can do all, and she had all these plans, succession planning, all of this stuff. It clearly was not people. So what was it? Why was she struggling so much? Then we got talking about our boss. She started talking to me about how her boss was out to get her, how her boss, her words, not mine, he hates me, he's out to get me, he's trying to fire me, all of those different things. He wrote me up, and I was just listening for a long time. And as I sat and I listened to her, a few things started to come into view, right, that I feel like maybe I had identified what the problem was. So we had some time and we had some good conversation. And I outlined for her, okay, let's look at it from the boss's perspective. What is the boss's job? And as we unpack this together, his job is to give you direction. His job is to encourage you. He has kids. He has a mortgage. He pays it by helping you, right? And he's successful when you're successful, and when you're not, he's not. And then she started saying how he was unreasonable. And I was, well, I have the same boss as you, and I encourage you. And we walked through a strategy for a conversation where she was going to kind of share with him her perspectives. And Monique's a very courageous woman, right? But we can all do it. And she had a conversation with this gentleman. I left that company many years ago, and so did our boss. Now, Monique, on the other hand, is still there, but she has been promoted 4 times. She has, 4 times the responsibility. I would imagine her income is significantly higher. She's also a single mom. In that period of time, she finished and got her degree. One of her sons got his degree. And 2 others are in college. Now, I'm not in any way taking credit for what Monique did. She worked, she earned it, that's on her. But when she got her first big promotion and she called me and thanked me for my help, again, I'm not talking about me being all that. I'm just simply saying is that I didn't realize the impact I was having on her until later, right? And where would she be if she'd never challenged how she saw that character in the movie of her life, that at that time was her boss? And this is just, again, a thing for us all to think about. And we take a look at the lens, right? We've talked about how we see ourselves and how we see other people and that cast of characters in our lives. Excuse me. One of the things that is the most important for us to realize, especially in the roles that you play, is that we're in most cases going to get our support from where? From each other. Right? We're going to get a lot more support. So building this positive peer pressure environment. So as we heard Monique's story, and again, that was a structure that an organization had set up to help and support her. But what can we do as people, right, to help ourselves in this situation? And one thing is, check in on each other, right? Be strategic. What can we do as a group to come together and lift each other up, right? Those characters in the movie of our lives, our coworkers, our colleagues, checking in. I mean, how many of us have been having a bad day and someone reaches out to us and says, man, I feel so much better now. Start a group. What does that mean? What does that mean, start a group? What would happen even if it was a Facebook group or a social media group where you shared fun ideas or what's happening at home with each other within the workplace? Maybe we get together and we all read, we have a discussion board that we use and we're all reading the same book, right? And we talk about those different things, or what can we do to build that in our organization? Again, that's something that we can really control, and then being strategic about our relationships, being intentional about them. So as we move on here, how can you support another colleague? Just something for each of us to think about. How can you support another colleague? And again, who supports you, right? As we continue to move on here, this has just been so much fun. Hopefully you're enjoying all of our time here together as we move into the last third of our time. As you can see, we're talking about nurse appreciation, but we're also really looking at how can I enjoy the movie of my life even more? Right? Something that we're all always looking to do. What's another thing that every good movie has? Every good movie is going to have a main character. There's going to be supporting characters. And also, every good movie is going to have a good plot. Right? A plot. Why do we do what we do? We're going to talk a lot about that, our plot, our purpose. But if I were to ask you what the plot of your movie would be, would you be able to answer it? What kind of a movie would it be? Would it be a love story? Would it be a comedy? Would it be hopefully not a horror movie? What kind of movie would it be, right? And as we think about our lives in this way, we're thinking about characters and the cast of characters and now the plot. One of the things is for also that a lot of movies are going to have that come against that plot, that challenge that plot as a villain. All right. What would you say would be the biggest villain for all of us in our own way? The biggest villain that stands in the way for all of us. See, the biggest villain that we all face is fear. Fear. Right? Sometimes it's fear based on previous failure. Sometimes it's fear based on a mistake that we made. But fear, right? How many of us are trying to do our best and live our best lives, but we're nervous and stressed? That's all different manifestations of fear. Right? So many times as things go through we go through our lives, we look at fear. And I always love telling the story about these baby eagles, right? Every time a mother eagle is getting ready to have babies, she builds a nest really high up, usually up in a tree, up on top of a really high cliff, and she builds the nest, and she builds it nice and safe and cozy, and then she lays the eggs and sits on them, and the baby eagles hatch, and once and after they hatch, she starts to feed them. And she goes and she goes and gets food. She brings it to them. And then after a while, that the baby eagles start to grow and get big. And the mom knows that they're starting to get a little bit too big for this nest. So what she does is she takes the inside of the nest and she starts to turn the sticks and make it a little less comfortable, in hopes that the baby eagles will be uncomfortable and they will leave. But oftentimes they don't. So then what she does is she takes the baby eagle, she puts it up on the edge of the nest, and she just nudges it a little bit with her beak. trying to encourage the baby eagle to jump. Imagine that fear just for a minute. As you look across this big blue sky, all you've known is that nest. Oftentimes that doesn't work either. And what happens is then she goes and she takes the baby eagle, she takes it all the way as high as the eye can see, and she drops it. And on the way down, while that baby eagle is panicking and freaking out, on the way down, that baby eagle learns that it has wings. It learns that it has the ability to fly, right? It learns that what its purpose is, to soar the skies, to hunt, to dominate. Obviously, as we all know, that if that baby eagle doesn't learn to fly, though, she grabs it again and takes it up and drops it again. How many of us, if we look at our lives and look at the changes we've made and the growth we made, it's a lot of times it was a result of a fall that we were terrified of. What fall do we have in front of us that is holding us back from embracing our purpose, embracing the things in our lives? Fear doesn't stop at any specific age. My sixth grader is fearful of his friends thinking this or that, and my nephew is fearful of his ACT score. And then my cousin just got out of college. He's fearful. Will I get a job? And then you fast forward all the way to some of the people I know that are in their mid-70s. Am I going to outlive my money? Fear will be there, no matter what. All right, but once we start to really lean into it and embrace that, a lot of times that fear feels like it's a self-defense mechanism, but really it can turn into a stumbling block. And as we think about our purpose, the plot of our movie, and we're going to talk more about nursing here in a little bit too, but these are some broad themes of how many things in our life, in your life, are we afraid of. And then another one I'd like to kind of challenge is that life is a journey. Is it? I mean, there's countless songs with that line in it. When you think about life as a journey, think about that for a minute. Okay, so life is a journey. So what's the goal of a journey? When I get in the car and I drive, 5 hours to see my friends or to my family, or I drive down to Kalahari or Cedar Point with my kids, I just want to get to the end, right? I want to get to the destination. That's the goal. I'm just trying to get to the end of the journey. But what is that what life is like then? Let's imagine for just a moment that life is a journey, and let's use our movie idea. Let's say that we're going to go to a movie. So thinking about life as a journey, I'm really excited about the new Top Gun movie when it comes out. And really, I cannot wait to get to the end of that movie. I'm not going to waste any extra time in the theater. Matter of fact, once I get there, I'm gonna get there, right before it starts. I'm gonna go to imbd.com and I'm gonna figure out exactly how long the movie lasts, and I'm gonna do just like this young lady in the picture here. I'm gonna look, say, is it over yet? Is it over yet? And then when the credits roll, I'll probably be looking a lot like this guy, right? Sleeping, right? As it happens. I mean, we know that that's really not what we're gonna do, right? But if life is a journey, this part right here of the movie is the best part, the end. Or much more realistic, what if instead of life is a journey, I go and I take a minute here, Memorial Day weekend, it's coming up when the movie comes out, and I'm going to make sure I have a babysitter so me and my wife, we can go and we can get dinner before the show. We're going to sit there and we're going to get there nice and early, and we're going to find our spot right in the middle of the theater so nobody can distract us. Those people coming and going will be out of our way. And then when the movie starts, I'm going to watch Tom Cruise be Maverick and all of this action and all of these big flying scenes. And I know, just like every movie, there's going to be a villain. There's going to be bad things that happen. There's going to be problems. There's going to be challenges that come up. And I'm sure that there's going to be moments of heartache, and there's going to be moments of cheering. And then as we go through this movie, no doubt there's going to be fun and excitement. And usually the good guy wins, and I'm going to be like, man, that movie was awesome. I won't even be there when the credits roll. How many of us spend our lives waiting? spend our lives thinking about down the road, someday. When can I be happy? Our life is not something that should be waded through. We don't do that with a movie because we want to enjoy the movie. See, our life is very similar. It's something that's supposed to be experienced. And the purpose that we have, the life that we live, it doesn't come at the end of the movie. It's happening right now. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a group recently, and this young mom came up to me. She was probably in her early 30s. She had 4 kids, and she was telling me how she was so excited about her purpose and how she found her purpose. And she was just so excited about her purpose. And I said, oh, really? Great. Tell me more. And she says, yeah, I'm really going to dive into my purpose once my kids get out of school. Once my kids get out of school, then I'm going to really focus on my purpose, and I'm going to really make sure the world knows that I was there. I was here. And I'm like, wait a minute. Think about that for a minute, friends. When the kids are gone, that's when she's going to start her purpose. How many of y'all know that as soon as those kids are gone, she's going to be looking back at right now, wishing that she was there? I explained to her that you have an opportunity right now to because of your family. You guys made the financial decision that you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, and that's great. What bigger purpose do you have right now than raising your kids? What a privilege. Many of us don't have. Many of us have both of us working, right? But she was delaying her purpose for down the road, sometime down the road, and it was like the light bulb went off. Yes, she can have a second act. She can go in to do other things. My mom recently retired. Now she runs a teen center for disadvantaged and underprivileged youth. Right? But her purpose didn't start then, right? And that's with us. How many of us are waiting to feel like our life matters, waiting to feel like our work matters, right? And I'm here to tell you, friends, that you are in that spot right now. The life that you have, it's taxing, it's tiring. I'm sure sometimes it's just straight up annoying. But I just want to let you know how important the work that you're doing is, and ask you, what inspired you? What inspired you, to become a nurse? What inspired you to do that? While you're thinking of that, I recently, it was actually about a year and a half ago, I was out riding my bicycle, and my wife, it was right in that COVID space where only my wife could come into the hospital with me. But anyway, I was out riding my bike, and all of a sudden I felt like someone was sitting on my chest, and I couldn't breathe, and I was just freaking out. And I went to the hospital, and I had AFib, and of course at the time I didn't know anything about AFib, and I was just freaking out. And the nurses at the emergency room, they were really nice. They were very helpful. But that was great. But then as I had to spend the night there, I remember the first night, at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up and I was just rocked. I mean, I was still in AFib. I was thinking about my wife. I was thinking about my kids. And to be honest with you, friends, I was crying. I'm a guy. I'm a family. I got a career. I'm not supposed to sit here. I was a mess. And I don't even remember the young man's name, but he was the nurse. Actually, John was his name. His name was John. I remember because, anyway, we had a conversation the next night. But that first night, he was busy, but he sat and he was like, "You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this." And he just listened to me go on and on. In that moment, he was the most important person in the world to me because I was at a level of vulnerability that I had never been at before. Right? And you get to do that for people, right? So think about who and what inspired you to be a nurse. I want you to take just a moment and think about that. I told you my story, and I'm sure the thing is you may not recognize it all the time, but that those people who inspired you in those moments and those situations that inspired you, right? You're like what that young man was to me to people all the time. So thinking about our purpose down the road, and a lot of times we can, so think about who inspired you. And take just a minute and pause the video for just a second and think about that. Who inspired you to be a nurse? Be very specific. Was it a nurse that you knew, a parent, a friend, a relative? Think about that for just a few moments. Now I'm going to ask you to do something with that information. Action, right? Action is important. I'm going to encourage you, if you're able to, the person's still with us, would you consider reaching out to them and thanking them? Right? Would you consider sending them a note saying, hey, I just want to let you know that back in college, I was really frustrated and you really helped me. Maybe it's a professor, or maybe, it was someone you worked with. And copy me on it. I would love to see that. I would love to see. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to get involved. I just would love to see it. I get encouraged watching other people encourage each other. Right? Because no doubt about it, you're going to influence thousands of people, just like whoever influenced you. Thousands of people are influenced. A nurse is going to interact with thousands of people through the course of their career. And you know what? And you all know this. You're not always going to get the best version of people. And that's why there needs to be more than just 1 week of nurse appreciation, because of the work that you do. But reach out to that person. And I guarantee you one thing. Copy me on it, because I'd love to see it. But I guarantee you that you're going to walk away from that feeling really excited. Right? And then as we think about one person at a time, right? Each one of those patients that we spend our time with, that's really where it's going to be at for us, is to embrace that purpose. So just as I leave you all, it's been a lot of fun spending some time with you all. It's an absolute privilege to spend some time with you. But if you think about your life and you think about the work that you're doing, what kind of a character are you, right? What kind of a character are you? And then looking around you at the cast of characters, whether it's your boss, your coworkers, your colleagues, your patients, all of those characters, just know that they're active parts, and sometimes how we see them changes their role. And then our plot, our purpose. Don't fall into that trap that I've fallen into. We all have it sometimes, where you're sleeping in the theater. Maybe enjoy the movie. Enjoy the movie, because it's going by so fast. And the purpose that you have is here right now. And I just want to lastly just let you know that the world is waiting to watch this epic, heroic tale that is the movie of all of your lives. And the work you're doing is just so valuable. And it's been an absolute honor and privilege to spend time with you all today. If you have any questions, you can email me at joshua@joshuaspears.com. I would love to interact with you. Let me know, any thoughts you have. If you've been encouraged, just like you, I need encouragement too. But it's been a privilege. I hope you feel appreciated this week, because you are. And I want you to thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.